You can look for silver linings. Most times in horrible things, you're not going to find them, but you can create them. And from that is where you start in the direction of thriving. Pause, grab a piece of paper and put it on a post-it note and stick it on your refrigerator. Living in anger over the circumstances does not change anything.
I honestly had goosebumps. The world is not built for blind people. Obviously,
Right.
it's built by able-bodied for able-bodied largely.
She follows no rules. No rules
Oh
for Daisy, right?
my God. Today's guest is Kristin Smedley, a TEDx speaker, a best-selling author, the force behind an upcoming film, and a passionate advocate for the blind community. When her two sons were diagnosed with CRB1 related blindness, Kristin turned her challenges into purpose, founding the Curing Retinal Blindness Foundation and launching the Thriving Blind Academy. Her work has raised millions of dollars, inspired thousands of people directly or indirectly affected by disability and more, and basically redefined what's possible without sight. Contrary to what you might expect from this very heavy topic, this conversation was actually fun. Thanks to Kristen's overall positive outlook towards life, her high energy, and just her way of encouraging anybody in whichever situation to be better versions of themselves. Please welcome Kristin Smedley. Start with introducing yourself, like maybe a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, what is keeping you busy these days, and what exactly brought you to this point in life.
Yeah, so I'm Kristin Smedley. I am a Philly girl through and through. I'm born and raised in Philadelphia. Left for a little while, chasing some dreams and things like that, and was never so happy to be able to come back home to my hometown where I was very involved in my school, in sports, in the community, my family. I have a huge family, very involved in the community. So it's been really cool to be able to live and work and raise my kids right here in my hometown that gave me so much. And nowadays, I mean, not only did my town give me so much, growing up in this city has just been absolutely incredible. They gave my kids an incredible opportunity. There's that whole it takes a village to raise a child. And
Yes.
as we'll talk about today, there was a period of time where I was really upset that I didn't know if my kids would have a place in the community. And I have a big cheesy smile because I could not have been further from the horrific thoughts that I thought our journey was going to be like to where it is now. And I'm actually looking around my studio and my office here at all of the pictures and the things that my kids have been able to accomplish because the community really became our village, our lifeline, and helped me create opportunities where the world saw obstacles, my community created opportunities. So I'm excited to be here and deep dive into it all.
Wow, awesome. Can you share a little bit about your kids? Like, share a bit about Michael, Mitchell, and Clarissa. Like, what was that about? The whole thing.
Michael now he lives in Florida. He went for the warm weather. Actually, he went for the big job opportunity, which is he's working in Disney Live Entertainment. He's actually working on their one of their newest shows that's coming out now as an audio engineer, and he's getting his MBA at Purdue University.
Exciting.
Yeah, yeah. It was a bit tricky though. All of the stuff in our house is Penn State because he's a Penn State grad, summa cum laude, right? So that's very exciting for him. Actually he turns 25 in next week. He turns 25.
Okay.
Yeah, he's having a good time. And I get to have free tickets to the Disney parks when I go visit him. Mitch is in his final semester of college here. He's just an hour and a half here in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania. President of his radio station. He is really good on the radio with sports talk and country
Wow.
music. And then my daughter Carissa, she's in her second year of college on a full basketball scholarship. She's the youngest, but she's the tallest in the house.
That is so
Uh,
exciting. Everything that everyone is doing at this point. Wow. since you didn't mention, for anybody who doesn't know a bit of Christine's background, Mitchell and Michael are blind. They were born with CRB-LCA, and please correct me if I'm getting them wrong, but CRB-LCA is a condition, it's a rare condition, as I've learned from Kristen herself, and they were born with it, which means they were born blind, legally blind, and yeah, so Clarissa is sighted, and Kristen has raised all of them to be these wonderful people with exciting lives. Okay, so initially, I know you've shared this a few times before, but just for anybody that who's listening for the first time to your story, what were the initial thoughts and feelings when you learned of your firstborn's blindness?
Yeah, I'm so happy that you asked that because people see my smile and hear my excitement every day now. And I want to be perfectly clear for folks, no matter what it is, the struggle, the setback, the curveball, as I call them. Um, I did not start this way. I mean, I started as most horrifically as you could possibly start a journey like this. I had big plans, and and then when I was in the little tiny exam room in Children's Hospital, Philadelphia, after Michael he was 5 months old, and he had been having his eyes were swirling when he was laying on his back, and we eliminated, there was no brain tumor. He was perfectly healthy. And then we go to a retina specialist at Children's Hospital, and the doctor said to me, Kristen, your son is blind. And I always pause after I say that statement because at that point in my life, in my mid late 20s, that was the worst sentence I had ever heard somebody say to me. Kristen, your son is blind. What I would come to figure out is it was because I had no story of blindness that equaled thriving and success or smiles the way that my life was. Nothing in what I knew of the word blindness in any way resembled how I grew up. That is why I crushed to the floor of that exam room. But as soon as I got home, it was actually my grandmother who lived to be almost 103. She was this magnificent, solid German woman. She was going through her own struggles of some health stuff and kind of the why am I still here. She happened to be at my parents'. She had just moved into there when I got home, and she was the only one there. And when I tell you, for people that think, and maybe you have listeners that are like, how can I be helpful to a family member that's struggling? How can I help someone that just got that diagnosis? I'm telling you, my grandmother was there with it sounds simple, but to hug me when I told her and I was sobbing. She didn't have any answers. She couldn't even come up with a prayer or a Bible verse at that moment, but she just hugged me. And that was my first clue that I had a tribe that was going to, and a village that was going to get me through this. I would learn eventually that I really needed to start asking for help. And I really needed to start finding people to help me get my head around it. I will say, though, that it did take me 3.5 years of praying blindness away every night and every morning being angry it was still there. I don't recommend that to anyone. And going through it, constantly angry that it's happening, got me nowhere. Right. So, if anything, anybody, right now, stop, pause, grab a piece of paper and put it on a post it note and stick it on your refrigerator. Living in anger over the circumstances does not change anything. Right. So, we could dive in a little more into how we moved on from that.
Yeah, I honestly had goosebumps at 2 points. One, when you were sharing how you felt when the doctor told you, and two, when your grandma gave you the hug. I honestly had goosebumps. Thank you for sharing that. So what were if you could share like some specific incidents or factors or people even, who are the key support systems and enablers as you kind of shifted your perspective from the initial discouraged one and to what you are today?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's such a brilliant question. And it's not one that people often ask me in the way that you just did. Because, like I said, my grandmother just giving a hug was a first thing that was pushing me in a thriving direction, right? But here's the thing that I want every parent, teacher, anyone that is remotely connected to a child to hear. It was my son, Michael, the blind one, right? The one that I believed all of the dreams for his life were gone. All the opportunity, all the possibility was erased and eliminated by that diagnosis. It was Michael at 3.5 years old that was the first one to change how I looked at this. Because he said to me one morning when I was literally at my ugliest of cries and my angriest of moments and my biggest temper tantrum in faith. How could this happen to a child like this, right? Why would something like this happen? I was so mad. And it was Michael that came into me that morning and said, Mommy, isn't this the best day ever? And I thought to myself, you have no idea that your best day is going to be a fraction of my best day. And as your mother, I'm thinking all this, right? As your mother, that is not okay with me. I'm supposed to make this an easier road for you. And I simply said to him, and this is the lesson for parents, I simply said, why? Why do you think that? And he said, Mommy, the sun is shining and I have all my toys and I'm just so happy. And it was a miracle, as my uncle had said to me, Kristin, you're praying for a miracle. And it turns out and it was a miracle because I looked at it completely different. I was no longer blind to the fact that my son was enjoying every moment of his life. I was missing it, right? I
You
couldn't
prayed away your
wait.
own blindness of
Yes,
sorts.
I was the one that was literally in the dark, not seeing life like Michael was seeing and not seeing the way he was enjoying it. All of 3.5 years raced through my brain. And all I kept thinking was this tiny little kid knew the entire neighborhood. He was like the mayor. He'd walk down the street, and people, when I started thinking about, wow, people don't look at him sad. They look at him as he brightened every person's day. It's another thing that I hope that people take away from this is really your perspective. I mean, you wake up in the morning and you're expecting, like we're under construction of my boiler and my hot water and all the things. I could wake up every day and say, this is going to be another horrible day because nothing is working out right. Instead, Michael taught me, hey, Saturday, I couldn't do my laundry because that had piled up because of all the plumbing issues. Well, my daughter's an hour away playing college basketball. I got to go watch her game and go back to her dorm, and we were on multiple floors doing laundry because I can't do it at home. And then we were watching our favorite shows on Netflix and ordering food. What, you know what I mean? Like, but
Yeah.
all those
You
years
just
ago, I
learned
didn't look at it that
something.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Years ago, I sat in the sadness, but because of Michael saying, isn't this the best day ever? And seeing it through his version of life to find, as my friend David Fagenbaum says, you can look for silver linings. Most times in horrible things, you're not going to find them, but you can create them. And from that is where you start in the direction of thriving.
Along with the positives, what were some of the things? Because the world is not built for blind people.
Right.
Obviously, it's built by able bodied for able bodied largely. Things are changing for sure. But as a parent, there must have been times where things were limiting or holding them back, your kids, Michael and Mitchell. How did you deal with that as a parent, with the feelings and the situation?
It's a great question. And I'm glad that we're going to talk about it because it is important for me to talk about the fact that just because Michael changed my mind in that moment, it continued to be like pushing a ginormous boulder up a hill. And actually, to be perfectly honest and put in perspective, it made me twice as angry when people weren't opening doors because Michael went to this preschool. We lived in Chicago for a little while, and he went to a preschool that was like everyone in the country wanted this preschool because they had kids from the school district, regular community kids, and then kids with individualized education plans like my Michael. They did inclusion from the very beginning. They wanted to figure it out for these kids in the 3 to 5 years so they would have success in further years, right? It was incredible. But to get in there was, you know, how hard it is to get into a good preschool. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, it was nearly impossible. But kids with an IEP had a much easier road, right? He did so well when he started there. They called me after 1 week. He was in the school. They called me in, all the heavy guns, right? They were all furious. They told me I lied about him being blind. That was also the moment that I realized I was really in Michael's way because I had spent so many years and still after that, you know, when I stopped crying every single day after that moment, I still was looking for anything possible that would show me he wasn't as blind as I thought he was. And when I started seeing, oh my gosh, this kid is brilliant. What he was able to do in a preschool classroom, unable to access print, unable to see faces, unable to run through the room because he couldn't find obstacles. He had this
Yeah.
way of gently walking and gliding around. Then I thought, oh my gosh, where could he be if he had the tools to succeed? So then I started getting my head around the tools, and instead of the people coming to my home, instead of me acting like they were my therapist, right? I was like, hey, maybe we should learn about the tools of blindness. And then watching Michael soar with those tools in his hands, right? So then now you can imagine, now I'm like, I've got my cape on. I am super mom. I have done everything for this kid. He's taken off. We come back to Philadelphia to my hometown. I handpick the school district that we get to live in. And it's one of the top school districts in the state and in the country. And I get to the IEP meeting and they said, Michael will find his cubby 70% of the time. I'm like, 70% of the time. I just watched this kid. He's like the tour guide for everybody, showing them where everything is. Why only 70% of the time? I'm like, are these cubbies moving around? What kind of school is this? Like, you know? And they said, because Kristen, he's blind and 70% would be really good for him. And I was like, I lost my mind. That's what I'm saying. I got like twice as angry and twice as frustrated once I changed my perspective on this, seeing all the capability and possibility in Michael, and no one else saw it. That
Yeah.
nearly drove me out of my mind. Again, I was angry. I thought I should be able to drop him off and they were going to be able to take him to the next level, and they didn't. But in reality, they had never met a blind child. They didn't know a story that involved thriving, keeping up with, and out achieving their goals and plans for their students. They had no idea of that story. So I said to them all, we need to learn the news story of blindness together, and we're going to get Michael what he needs, and we're going to follow his lead. And I will say, all the credit in the world to that school team, because right at the moment that I was at my most angry, that my son was saying school was too hard and my son was no longer smiling every day. He was so frustrated that he couldn't access anything without the words to be able to say that yet. I was so frustrated that I searched. We didn't have Facebook yet, no Twitter, X, whatever it's called now. None of that. No Google. Can you imagine a life with no Google?
I can't.
I had to go and find people that were living the story I knew my son deserved an opportunity at. And I just so happened, we still don't know how it happened. I mean, it's a very funny story that my friend Ed used to tell. He just passed away a couple years ago. I found the phone number of Ed Wymeyer, who is Eric Wymer's dad. Eric Wymer is the first blind man to summit Everest and all seven summits. Eric had just come off of Mount Everest. Michael was in first grade. And through the news story, somehow with my psychotic mother skill of finding whoever my kid needs, right? I end up with the home phone number of Eric's dad, who was his marketing director at the time. And it's, oh my gosh, he used to tell this hilarious story of how he answers the phone. And I'm like, my son needs to know your son. But Eric was getting a huge award here in the city of Philadelphia. And not only did I get to witness my son, Michael, at 6 years old, talking to a man just like him that had just come off Everest. Michael has yet to meet a sighted person that has done that. right? Not only did I get to witness that moment and see Michael's brain blow wide open of possibility, I got to watch the entire individualized education program team from his school witness Eric also and hear him speak and understand how funny, witty, smart, grit, all the things that my Michael is. They saw it in the guy that just summited Everest, and that changed everything. From that moment on, there was never anything less than 100% achievement expected of Michael. But it was a very small group of people that started with that story of possibility. And from that, the ripple effect caused him to have that white cane in his hand that I was so afraid of, right? And had mastered Braille and led the graduation procession of the thousands of School of Communications graduates at Penn State University. Michael led the procession into the, oh my gosh, into the Bryce Jordan Center because he outachieved 10,000 Penn State graduates that year.
Yeah, I think a strong role model, and to see someone achieve things that sometimes you're not able to see our kids do, it definitely has like a massive impact.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, do
totally.
do you think your child's disability could have any impact in on a couple's relationship, good or bad?
So I don't think it's the condition or the curveball that impacts the relationship. What I do believe is the mindset around it.
Yeah.
So I thank God every day that Michael, I saw that. I prayed for 3.5 years to see it differently. And I was open to receiving that message, and I did. And then I went with that. You can change your mindset at any time. I mean, there are
Yeah.
there are people in our lives right now that it took some of them 5 years, some of them 6 months ago, and Michael's going to be 25. You can change how you look at it
Yeah.
at any point in time. But one thing I learned recently, because been having this other situation, I've been just trying to talk about praying something away, right? And being so angry,
Yeah.
right? And I read this quote that said, nothing changes unless nothing changes. Right. So if you're constantly looking at something with the same tools, the same point of
Yeah.
view, the same story, why would you expect that the next day you're going to wake up and it's suddenly going to
Can be
get
any
better?
different. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a big reason why I do the work that I do now and why I'm so glad you do what you do. If we're not going to reach out for help and ask for help, how can we ever expect to get the help we need?
Tell
Right?
me this. I know you mentioned that you've grown up with a large community. So I maybe you already had it in you, but was it any different for you to start reaching out for help? Because I know when I started losing vision, it was a conscious effort. It was a conscious shift for me because till 19 years of age, I didn't have to. Also, you're young and naive, right? So you don't really ask for help. But when I started losing vision, it was like a conscious shift and something that wasn't hard, but it was beautiful. It wasn't that hard, but and I absolutely loved, how far I could go if I was just open to asking for help. Was that like a transition for you at all, or did it come more naturally to you?
No, like I was saying, I mean, I was a insanely successful student and became a teacher. Like I did not like to say that I didn't know something. So for me, that push to get out there and learn about something I wanted to know parts of was a hell of a lot easier because it was my kid. For those that are listening and it's yourself, that was harder for me in the nightmare I was in, even before my divorce. And when that incredibly successful, smart, compassionate attorney said to me, "Whoa, Kristin, act like this is happening to one of your kids." So that's the only way from my personal experience that I can tell people to reframe this. What if it was your child? Right?
Yeah.
Would you sit there and be afraid to ask and be afraid to look for a mentor for your child? No, you wouldn't. So that's what I literally had to do that for myself.
That's amazing
right?
because there are so many times we talk about when we think of compassion and kindness, we are always flipping the stage, flipping the places, and we're like, would you do to that person what you're doing to that person? Would you have it do to yourself? Have it done to yourself? Like, would you imagine putting yourself in their shoes? But to put your kids in your place and then see if this is what you would want happened to them, like I mean, that's a whole different kind of ball game. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. I know we usually imagine parenting a blind kid or blind children to be hard and tough. What do you think are some of the upsides of parenting a blind kid or children?
Oh,
Can
I
you
love
think of
that.
some upsides for maybe it can be some impact on yourself, some impact on around you? I don't know, some fun incident. I don't know. Can you think
Yeah,
of
no,
something?
I was actually just talking about this with a I was on a big virtual thing with a bunch of parents the other day. There are more um there are more perks to as a parent to raising a blind child than a sighted child than I ever could have dreamt imaginable. I should actually write them all down and put them in a PDF. One thing I will say is kids in American schools these days that do not have an IEP, an individualized education, do not have a disability, do not have a learning difference, like my daughter that was just regular smart,
Yeah.
right? Have such a disadvantage. And I know that sounds bizarre to people, but when you really look at a child with a disability in the K to 12 public school system, or a learning disability, or even just accesses print differently, right? Maybe a
Yeah.
dyslexia, whatever, neurodivergent,
Yeah.
get that IEP as soon as you possibly can and wait till you see the tool that it is when it's used correctly. My sons knew they were in the IEP meetings and I had 8 meetings a year. I was one of those moms,
Wow.
right? And
Wow.
they were in them all. And every year I added a new responsibility to their list of responsibilities in the meetings such that and they knew what their strengths are and their weaknesses. My daughter was never in school did they discuss her strengths and weaknesses, right? She would get a
Mhm.
test back and showed what she got wrong. The
Yeah.
report card would show how she didn't measure up. There was no here's your strengths, let's tap into that. The boys had that.
Yeah.
And then by the time they were in high school, they ran those meetings. They knew how to send out invitations. They knew how to, the teachers that were flaky and didn't do RSVPs, how to do like really get them to respond. They knew how to run a meeting, how to do a PowerPoint. They knew that if you assigned somebody to bring candy and pizza, everybody would show up. Like so they go into the workplace now and they're like,
Wow.
people are like, how old are these kids that they can manage all of this,
Yeah.
right? So that was a huge perk education wise. But honestly, and it's in my TED talk if people want to go look at it and watch it.
I will make sure the link is in the
Oh,
bio.
perfect.
Sure.
Perfect. Because the biggest thing that people don't understand is, I was at the birthday parties with my boys. I developed enemies in second graders, and I would walk through the school and they'd be like, "Mrs. Smedley's a cheater." I'm like, "You were drilling people with the goal whatever the dodgeball, right?" I'm like, then they played in the
Yeah.
dark dodgeball. I'm like, "Are you kidding me with this?" Right?
Yeah.
I wasn't just dropping off at birthday parties and kids'
Hmm.
houses.
Hmm.
I was in them to guide my guys, right?
Yeah.
And I was on the wrestling mats and on the baseball fields and in the swimming pool. I was literally the sighted guide.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, for my boys, you can imagine times two. That was a lot of investment and a lot of effort and a lot of time. But I got to tell you, the return on investment of being there side by side with your kid is absolutely, there is no, there's no formula that will give you what the incredible perks are of that. I mean, my boys just have this, and my daughter has it too, because I realized it when she was 5 that she was not getting the access that the boys had, and I changed everything. Um,
Okay. She was not getting the access the boys had.
yeah, because I had two of
You,
them, right, and they were literally
yeah,
on either side of me,
yeah.
going everywhere because I took my
Access to
kids
you.
everywhere. Yeah,
Right.
and she didn't have that same, and she was very independent and smart and capable, and I
Hmm.
would say be to caution parents. of the kids that are independent and smart and capable, and make sure you're not sending them out there to do too much without you, or at least sit down on the floor at the end of the day and talk about all the adventures, right? And be in
Yeah.
that world with them and spend that time. Thank God I saw that at 5 years old with my daughter. And like I said, I was there. She couldn't wait for me to, she thought it was hilarious. I was doing my laundry in her dorm and we
Yeah.
watched Gilmore Girls and,
Oh,
ate
I love Gilmore
salads.
Girls.
Oh my gosh, so do
Amazing.
we. So do we. But anyway, and that helped me to back to your question of what are some of the bright sides. You know, going through that hard spot with my daughter at 5 years old, trying to figure out where I was going wrong, helped me realize that let me spend time with each of my kids and figure out what makes them tick, right? The things that, like, Carissa couldn't stand fireworks or loud concerts. Me and the boys live for fireworks
Are you
and loud
serious?
concerts,
I would have imagined the
right?
other way around.
And we're like, exactly, right? And we're like, how is she related to us? However, the things that she did love, she would go to all the boys events and blind sports, regular sports. She knew Braille to be able to play Braille Uno and all that. Equally, they went to her things and took interest in the things that she was interested in and cheered for her at the things that she was doing. Every senior night for every one of the varsity sports that she played, Michael surprised her and flew in on his own time. He would schedule a flight and fly in and surprise her. And Mitchell's done it too. He was home for break and went and surprised her. We surprised her in Tampa.
Your kids, all three of them, are pretty successful for where they are in life and doing such exciting things. Obviously, you gave them that space to become their own people. How did you walk that delicate balance between being a support, a sighted guide, and giving them the space to kind of come into their own as well? Because I know that's a tightrope that a lot of parents are not able to do. Either they would hold back in fear of not giving their kids the space, or they would do too much because, of course,
Mhm.
they would care. And they don't know where to stop in order to kind of let the kid become its own person. How did you walk that rope?
Well, I learned how to do it by screwing it up. I'm going to share this story with you because
I
I
think
could.
that's the best way to learn anything.
Oh my God. I want people to learn from all of my screw ups because remember, I have a second blind child
Right.
who is 100,000% different than Michael, right?
Wow.
Everyone expected a Michael Jr. walking behind him, and he could not be more different. I mean, this kid didn't want any parts of the tools of blindness. Like he was just like, and he is my middle child. He's what's that? I just listened to the Four Tendencies. That's an incredible book to read in terms
Right.
of kids. And he's my one that, like, any rules he's got a challenge. He wants a description of everything and a why behind everything, right? He's very different.
Okay.
Um, and he's a charmer. So he was getting Carissa figured she was his mom and I was Michael's mom, and that's how we were going to get this all done, right? And then he had a staff of girls in kindergarten doing everything for him. He would just go in and manage all of the things. I mean, he's in preschool, they told me he's such a leader, and I was like, dude, you better be careful. He's going to lead them right off of a building. He's so fun. So anyway, he gets to sophomore year in high school and he comes home, and what's the worst thing that a kid can say to their mom after, how was your day? He said, I sat by myself at lunch. And I said, what do you mean you sat by yourself? He's like, I don't know anyone in my lunch. I don't, and I sat all by myself and I can't do this all year. Could you call the school and switch my lunch? And I'm going, well, let's think about this. This was day one. Is it possible that you just, it was chaos in there? You didn't know where anybody was? No, mom. All of my friends are in other lunches. And I realized I had fixed so many things for him. And I'm like, if I fix this now, after I have fixed everything, then what? How's he going to survive college? Like I was thinking of the future constantly. So finally, I stood my ground. And I got to tell you, it was the hardest thing I ever did, standing my ground and not fixing that. And even Sassy, my dog, is getting upset over the story in the background. And he found 6 people that he knew. And step two was now text them and say, hey, turns out I'm in your lunch. Can you guys look for me? And then the text, this was all over the weekend. And then it was, hey, we've been sitting over at this one side, whatever. Well, by Monday morning, it was, we're going to look for you. And Monday, he came home from school and said, Mom, I found them all. And they were great friends of his. They just, the school is so big, they didn't know where he
Yeah.
was. So that was one of my most horrific moments as a mom. But like I said, learn from that of thinking the future kid. Do you want a kid that because you fixed everything, they're going to be in your home after graduation and never being able to go out and live on their own? No, none of us wants that for our kid,
Yeah.
right?
To take your kids out there and make them so independent, ensuring that they are social, they are meeting other people, they're doing everything that other kids are doing, it couldn't have been easy. There must have been a lot of times, and I imagine like most of the times it would be that the community or the environment wasn't really ready for them, and you had to
Hmm.
jump in there and kind of make it ready for them and
Hmm.
accommodate them and ensure that your kids got what they deserve from that environment. That's
Oh yeah. Oh
brilliant.
yeah. I mean, listen, you think about this. I'm in the most competitive town for Little
Yeah.
League baseball, and I walk into baseball registration day, the happiest day in Northampton Township, and I've got a kid, a 9-year-old with a white cane. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not exactly the most welcoming, but
Yeah.
here's what I'll say about that. Before I even asked my community to make space and opportunities for my kids, I was out there giving to the community. I mean, I was raised to be a giver. My friend Bob Berg wrote a book, The Go Giver, not the Go Getter, the Go Giver.
Yeah.
I was raised as a go giver. So I didn't expect that somebody would coach my 3 and 4-year-old kids in soccer when I have the soccer love and background. I coached them and I
Mm.
taught other kids to love soccer as much as I love it. Right. And then, I was in the school volunteering as a homeroom mom to teach kids to enjoy the holidays and all the things and service projects as much as I
Yeah.
do. So when it came time to walk into that baseball, registration day, there were people in there who I had already given to their families
No.
and they were opening the doors to help me so they could give to my family. So my biggest advice is be a giver in all ways that you can, but at the same time, to your point of you go through a day and you've got to like create awareness for all
Yeah.
these people that see as odd. I want parents especially, and I want to acknowledge too, individuals living with vision loss. It is
Yeah.
hard on you all. That lowers bandwidth all day long, right? So I didn't realize it until I dropped my boys off at Blind Sports one time in Philly. And I asked Michael, I said, I watch you do everything. But when you're at Blind Sports with these other blind kids that love sports as much as he does, you're different. What is that
Wow.
about? And he
Yeah.
said, Mom, because for 2 hours on a Saturday morning, we don't have to worry about bringing awareness to the sighted people, dealing with all your stupid things that you say and all of the weird, awkward moments that you guys create, not us, right? He's like, I
Yeah.
just get to be me. And that was one of the turning points, transformative moments in my journey that I made sure they were in at least 1 or 2 weeks of a camp in the summer with just blind
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah.
right? Always involved in a sport with just blind kids. And it's
Yeah.
it's one of the biggest reasons I created Thriving Blind, the community, so that people with vision loss can just come in and hang with people with vision loss and talk about whatever they want to talk about, right? That
Yeah.
it's your people.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to talk a bit about the support systems, the tools, the aids that you utilized or you saw helped with the journey. So I'm actually surprised that none of the big organizations like NFB, AFB, Association for the Blind, ACB, they haven't come up yet. Did these organizations and resource groups play a part in Michael and Mitchell's journey at all?
Not necessarily the organizations, but people in them. Like Kirk Adams, he was the CEO for a long time of American Foundation for the Blind,
Right.
AFB, has lived with vision loss his whole life. He's a very successful, smart leader. So his point of view is always from, a successful leadership CEO level of how you should solve things when a kid is 16,
Mm-hmm.
right? I didn't necessarily want a support system. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted a success strategies
Yeah.
group. I remember when we built the house here, um, the selection of granite was not a great selection. So we ended up with a black granite on cherry cabinets. And I'm like, and I had dark green plates. And I'm like, well, this isn't going to work. Right. So just switching to the white plates because they had a little bit of vision to see the high contrast was
Yeah.
life changing.
Yeah.
Just little things like that. My thing was always if I'm not here, can they
Yeah.
be independent?
You're gonna have to let the kids lead the way. Like listen to what they are saying and listen to what they might need and kind of assess who they are as individuals and what they need. And just with that attitude where you are able to make space for an individual and not stereotyping them, helps you work around your disability much better.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah. Once you see the I mean, I say in my new parenting book that's coming out to
yeah,
literally write down the word disability and cross out as dark as
yeah,
you can the DIS because
yeah,
the abilities, those unique abilities in a disability
yeah,
are incredible. And I also think that one of the best things, and I still tell myself this every day of my life with my kids and my life itself
hmm,
to stop focusing on how you think things should be and just step back and be looking for how they could be.
yeah.
That made all the difference
Yeah,
for me.
shift of perspective. So, what
Yeah.
were some of the tools and aids do you think that have helped? You mentioned Cane and Braille. Anything
Hmm.
else you want to add to the list? Some technologies, some aid that has helped Michael and Mitchell through their life and
I
growth.
will say the number one tool, no matter, I mean, you could have every thought leader book. You could have every thought leader in your living room. You could have every successful blind person at your
Yeah,
kitchen table and
yeah,
every piece of equipment. But if you don't have the mindset of possibility and thriving, and that you deserve or your child deserves every
yeah,
opportunity that they want to pursue, not that what we want or what we think people want us to pursue, but an
yeah,
expectation that living outside of the ordinary expectations is pretty incredible. So if you don't have the mindset of thriving, no amount of equipment or tool is going to be helpful. So that's the very first one. And everything you can possibly do to continue to have a mindset where you shift from should be to could be is
yeah,
number one. The second thing I would say is it took me a long time to embrace the tools of blindness because I thought that cane represented dependence. And what have seen, I have witnessed,
right,
is the independence that a tool like a white cane
yeah,
created. It was actually my most viral post ever on social media was when I said I couldn't stand this white king because people stared at us.
yeah,
And to this day they stare. And my daughter couldn't stand it either. But
yeah,
she came to the same realization, go ahead and stare because that cane has led them to incredible places because they embraced it and learned how to use it. The other thing is braille. I mean, and it doesn't have to be braille, but literacy is everything. Literacy is everything. My boys could not keep up, let alone surpass their classmates if they were
yeah,
listening to audio textbooks. It's just impossible. They
yeah.
learned to be literate. And then we did things like audiobooks when they were really going fast and teachers couldn't keep up with them. Right?
Wow.
Find the people or find it in yourself. Don't stop believing in yourself, believing it's possible and going for it.
So in terms of technologies, you're cited. So you're observing all this crazy technology innovation happening in the mainstream, like driverless cars and AI and space, all of that aerospace stuff. Everything is happening out there. When you compare that with innovation and development for disabled people or visually impaired people or blind people. It could be assistive technology. It could be just accessible technology. How do
Mhm.
you think that is developing, the assistive and accessibility part of technologies? How, in comparison with the mainstream technologies?
Look, this is where you're going to start getting me all fired up because I'm like, the technology is there. Um,
Yep.
we have just, I believe that our uses, needs, and the impact on our community have been sidelined for entirely too long. And I'll give you a frame of reference. When the first ever treatment for a blindness was coming to the FDA, there were so many conversations about who was going to pay for it, right? And I remember when I was talking with the company developing it, they said that there was someone at the table in the conversation that said they would never pay for a treatment for blindness because blindness doesn't cost their insurance company anything. And I said, that's about the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Blindness, or actually not thriving with blindness, not innovating on tools to
Yeah.
navigate a world without sight, not developing better access to Braille, like all the not thriving that this world has done and been in the
Yeah.
way of is costing us huge. So I actually went to the FDA to testify on behalf of that. And I did with my little pen and paper as a
Yeah.
former third grade teacher, what it costs just K to 12 in terms of Braille technology that was actually available, extra teachers
Mm.
to decipher the Braille, interpret it, whatever, all the
Yeah.
things times two, $500,000 it cost our community to educate my boys just like everybody else, the same access, right? I'm
Yeah.
not talking about Rhodes Scholars. And this is what I learned from my friend Tom Lukowski at Comcast. When you design things, when you design technology, when you innovate and design with a blind person in mind, it actually impacts everyone in positive ways. So
Yeah.
many of look at the talking remotes now,
Yeah.
right? And hey, Alexa, all that, when they were thinking about how the blind person can access in our house, everyone uses that stuff, you know? So it's like the return on investment of that is huge. Getting people to understand that is like, we'll have to talk in a few months and see
What
where
would
we're
you
at
say
with
to
that.
a technologist or a tech startup or an investor in that space when they wonder, why should I care about this space? Why should I invest in this, my time and resources in this space?
Making the world accessible for people that are blind, you now get them in the workforce. I actually just talked about this with clinical research. If you make your medical schools, your clinical research programs, and your labs and all of that accessible to people that are blind, you are going to innovate and cure diseases and advance all the fields, not even just research, AI, IT, all of the fields will
Yeah.
advance further and faster you could ever imagine if a person that is blind can access and be involved there. Because the competitive advantages
Yeah.
of someone that thinks like you do and thinks like Michael, because you're constantly problem solving.
Yeah.
When you're practicing problem solving all day long, you become the top problem solver. And
Yep.
isn't that who we want on all of our teams? Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Just switching gears a little, can you share a little bit more about, you mentioned it earlier, but share a bit more about Thriving Blind Academy and what made you kind of build that?
One TED talk for 18 minutes or one book that's 120 pages can only go so far. So then I developed the Succeed Without Sight Summit, the virtual event during COVID when no one could go anywhere, right? And I said, hey, all of my blind friends, hey, you want to come in? And just let's have a conversation for 15 minutes at a time so people can understand where I get all of my motivation and I don't let my boys say that's impossible
Yeah.
because I know it's possible. And then I was like, what, you can't even, that first one was 13 hours over 3.5 days. And I'm like, even 13 hours, like it's great to get that big injection of motivation like once
Mhm.
a year. But I know from myself, after 7 days, I'm like, that sucks again. The next thing that comes along, I'm like, so then I'm like, well, how can we? So then I did like a 6-week module of I think it was like 7 or 8 moms working through IEP goals and what's possible for their kids. And the breakthroughs that happened in 6 weeks. Then I'm like, oh my God. And then they're like, can we keep talking? And I'm like, oh boy, how do we do this? So then I was like, okay, let's create this thing where we come in weekly and talk. And now it got like global. We had people from all over coming in, all the countries everywhere. And then, well, in different countries, there's different things happening. And it's just, I mean, to watch like someone like Clark Reynolds, I met him at the first summit and he was so believing in himself as an artist. And he said, no one in London believes that a blind artist can make it. And I want to have Braille in my art. And I'm like, dude, you're killing me here. Like, blind artists with Braille, like that's unheard of. I'm like, but not impossible. Let's figure out how to make it possible. And then he
Right.
came into that community every week, talked about challenges, talked about successes. He's now commissioned, on two continents and is flying back and forth between America and the UK. I mean,
Wow.
it's he was different. He believed it was possible. Most people that come to me don't believe it's possible. And
Yeah.
even someone with as much energy and possibility as Clark, there's just so many barriers. So it's a
Yeah.
weekly, sometimes twice a week, because we added a monthly thing, right? Monday and Saturday,
Yeah.
that people need that motivation, strategies, and honestly, that little love push, like push forward. That's why I developed it. I mean, and like I said, it energizes me every week, and I learn and take risks and do all the things.
Yeah. If someone was part of the academy, like what would the process
Well, I've got, not only did I raise three successful kids that are all doing their things, I've got two dogs that exhaust me all day because they don't do anything I want them to do. So I make things as easy as possible. It is literally, you go to
Okay.
the website, you decide you want to be a member. It's thrivingblindacademy.org. You sign up, and I think it takes 2 seconds. I will say this. For right now, at least, our model is we're trying to, like somebody said, you're trying to turn the Titanic in the way the blind community not only is perceived, but as everyone perceives themselves.
Yeah.
And for the past 25 years, I have watched the model of the blind community is to be served, not to stand up and serve themselves or others, but they are to
Yeah.
be served. And that has not served us. That is
Yeah.
creating
Yeah.
that unachievement, right?
Rift.
So
I feel
we
like that
do,
creates a major rift because that limits us from becoming a part of the mainstream.
yes,
And unless, uh, blind people or disabled people, we become a part of the mainstream, it's very difficult to make people see you differently. You can't
yes,
live in a silo and expect people to start seeing you differently and then you will step out. You'll have to first step out. And of course, it'll be hard for the initial generations who to change that larger mindset. But once you do it, you're basically creating history. That's what helps the larger community see blind people in general differently. And
yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah,
love
so
your
so we
philosophy.
um we literally have the program. It's virtual. There's a whole virtual platform with courses, master classes, recordings of every single chat, that Zoom call that we do, all in the Thriver formula that people can go in and figure, oh, today I really need to know more about the tools of blindness. And
Yeah,
there's hours and hours of master classes and stuff where they can go at their own pace. And then we
yeah,
have our live stuff. But interestingly enough, when you look at, people will go for self-help, just to change their lives or whatever, like a Tony Robbins
yeah,
class, or even like somebody that just is not even that high level. I know
yeah.
for me, people spend thousands and tens of thousands of dollars to improve their lives.
I know.
You improve your life as a person living with vision loss, and everything is handed. It's
Yeah,
all handouts, it's all subpar, right? So we say invest $97 and we give you all of that access.
yeah,
There's an element of self-paced that I know people like to do that, but that's not what we push. That's great for you want some more, right? We're like,
yeah,
come into the community, learn
yeah.
from each other. And now here's the coolest part. Now we're about to, and we're going to announce it in the summit. We've had people in our community for 2 years that have
Mm-hmm,
invested in themselves, and they come in and invest in everyone else.
mm-hmm.
And now they're taking they're going to take the next step and be the mentors. They're going to host some of those group calls, right? getting people to understand that mindset
Mhm.
of you deserve as much investment in yourself as somebody, you know, down the street in your book club that is investing in their life too.
Okay, last question. Um, so what would you say, or what suggestion would you give, or which stereotype would you like to break for a parent who just learned that their kid is going to live with blindness?
The sooner that you can get your head around what I call learning to see, SEE, setting extraordinary expectations, understanding that it's not about the expectations you had for them. Let it go. I was so happy now that mine were destroyed. But really think on the word extraordinary. I mean, extraordinary means it's not something super achieved. That's not what extraordinary means. Extraordinary means outside of what is ordinarily expected. It's a decision that you make every day to live outside of the ordinary story that people tell about blindness. And when you look back, like I get to do now, everyone says my journey has been remarkable.
It has. I agree with all of those people.
Yeah. So I would say it really is about how you look at it, and all of the how falls into place. I never would have thought. I mean, I was so upset. I will say this too in closing. So people really, really drive this home after you've heard all of this great stuff. The very first question I asked that retina specialist was not, when will he learn Braille? What should I do when I get home? It wasn't. I said, will he play baseball? Can you imagine the stories that guy tells on stages right now, right? Like, how about this weirdo mom? Your son is blind. Oh, will he play baseball? Right? Will he play baseball? Now, had the doctor said to me, I don't know how he's going to play baseball, but if he wants to play baseball and you figure out some reasonable accommodations, sure, I believe he'll play baseball. Just know that convince yourself it's possible, and then your journey will be
Beautiful.
remarkable.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing your entire story and inspiring us through the way, Kristen. We really
Oh,
appreciate it.
thanks for asking me. Thanks for doing what you're doing, because this is what changes the world. All these stories out there in the world, that new extraordinary story. So thanks.
Thank you.